questions 2 and 4, and we're going to be discussing a couple of the ballot questions, one which is an initiative and the other which is a referendum. First up, we're going to be talking about question 2, which is a law proposed by initiative petition called public campaign financing. For those of you out there, this is going to be something you are going to be voting on November 15th, and hopefully we will be able to fill you in a little more and answer some questions. We'll have some people here from the question 2 side and some people here from on the question 4 issue. My first guest in the studio tonight is David Donnelly, and he is from the Yes on 2 campaign. We don't have someone here from No on 2. That doesn't mean that there aren't people who disagree with question 2. It just means that nobody wanted to come on the show. David, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't we start with just giving a general overview, and let me just mention that everybody should have gotten this in the mail, so we will be, you can read along at home if you have this, but sometimes it's kind of tricky to understand these things, but we'll try to make it a little clearer. David, why don't we start by giving us a brief overview of question 2 and what it's all about.
Sure. Question 2 sets up a new voluntary system where candidates who agree to overall spending limits and to low contribution limits can qualify for a set amount of public money to run their campaign. It covers all races for state office. Question 2 also bans soft money from state politics and increases disclosure of campaign finance activity. So the press and the public alike can get quick access to who's paying for the re-election campaigns of those who are going to be representing them on Beacon Hill.
Now, we've heard a lot about campaign finance over, the last number of years, and it seems like a good thing. It seems like something we all would all benefit us because there's such a discrepancy. There's so much money being spent on campaigns. And it's so expensive to run a campaign, and we know that our representatives are, it seems like we're being told that they're constantly having to raise money while they're in office.
Well, we think that there are a lot of good people caught in an awful system, and we really want to have an overhaul of the current system. I think most people believe that the system on Beacon Hill is just as bad as it is on Capitol Hill. Special interest lobbyists are the largest category of donors to legislative campaigns in the state. The cost to run for office is escalating. Average people just can't run for office without relying upon big money. We want there to be another way where candidates can qualify for a set amount of clean elections funding from public money and run for office without having to raise all that special interest money.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense to me. And I guess my first question is, what makes this particular configuration the way to go? I mean, do we vote for it because it is some kind of structure, or you have some experience in this field.
This is a comprehensive measure. This is not a partial solution. This is not tinkering with the current system. A lot of proposals that are put forth are like pushing down on a balloon and the money pops out somewhere else. This proposal lets the air out of that balloon. It really replaces all that dirty money, all the special interest money, with clean resources. Candidates can qualify for a set amount of money to run their campaign. They do so by showing they have broad public support from the people in their district, by raising a large number of small contributions from people they want to represent, and then they can receive enough money to run their campaign from the Clean Elections Fund, and they won't have to go tin cup in hand to those who are very interested in giving them money and asking for something in return later.
Okay, for example, let's just go through this a little bit.
Sure.
If you were going to run for an office, from governor all the way down to a state representative, you would you would raise a minimum number of contributions. So you would actually have to get a number of contributions. Are they?
Right. They're small contributions. They have to be less than $100, but they do have to be at least $5.
Okay, for example, if you were running for governor, you would have to get 6,000 small contributions. Right. If you were running for state representative, you would just have to get 200 small contributions. Then you would be eligible for the public funds. Okay, and the public funds, for example, for the primary election, if you were a representative, state representative, you would get $15,000. And the limit you could spend would be $18,000. So you could raise up to $3,000.
Well, those small contributions that you may have raised to qualify for the public money
could be
on top of that.
And ranging on up to governor, where in the primaries you would the public funds you would get would be $1.5 million, and the limit would be $1.8 million. And then you get a little more, once again, the general election. You actually get a little less for the general election. I guess they figure you need more money in the primaries.
Well, the primary is a longer process. The general election campaign is only 7 weeks. This is all premised on the idea that candidates can trade in on community assets rather than their moneyed assets. So if you serve on a school board, you serve on the board of the library, you've done good work for your children's school, that you've done a fair amount of community work, you've met a lot of people, you want to run for office, the first question you don't have to ask yourself is, where am I going to get all this money to run for office? You can say, do I know a lot of people? Are there a lot of people in this community who would like to see me serve in the state legislature? Then you can qualify for enough money to run your campaign.
Well, it sounds like a basically decent thing. I mean, let me go to the arguments. This is not being supported by the majority, what they call the majority of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, for the reason that they say that this is going to increase taxes. So the supporters of this petition estimate the increase at $45 million. This is what these opposition people say. They said that already we have a place for people to donate to a clean elections fund on your tax form. You can donate $1. Approximately 10% of taxpayers do this, and there's a small pool of money right now. What do you have to say? They say we have two choices. We would have to increase taxes or take funding away from meaningful programs such as education, child care, et cetera, et cetera. Where would this pool of money come from?
Let's take these arguments in turn. That committee of the legislature represents a small number of legislators. There are a lot of legislators that do support this. I want to be clear. Many of them are in this area. Pat Chalin is one legislator in Somerville that is supporting this. This costs a relatively little amount of money. It's 1/10 of 1% of the entire state budget. It would go towards cleaning up our entire political system. Nowhere in the proposal do we advocate or do we require an increase in taxes. That is the job of the legislature. If they see fit to raise taxes to pay for that, that's their problem. We think there could be savings in the state budget based on fewer giveaways to special interests that get their tax breaks or subsidies from years and years of campaign contributions. And this could actually allow a debate on the merits of several very important issues in front of the state. Education. Education dollars wouldn't be competing against those special interest tax breaks. So it could actually, a system like this could open up the political process and provide more funding for areas that are very important to the most needy of the state, education and other issues.
So do you agree that this would be about $45 million?
We estimate it would cost $14 million per year. The current system does produce about $4 million in a fund that partially publicly finances races only for governor. We don't think the problem begins and ends at the governor's race. We think the problem extends all the way down to the state legislative level in terms of the problem of money in politics. And the way that the funds are now generated for the current campaign finance fund is for a check off on the tax forms. But voters don't make up their political decisions on tax day. they make up their political decision on Election Day. And we hope that this Election Day on November 3rd, a yes vote on question 2 will speak very loud and clear to the legislature that they want this law fully implemented, including the funding. We have many candidates for the state legislature, candidates for re-election to the state legislature that are supporting us, including the leadership of both parties in the Senate and other very high up rank and file members in the state legislature.
Okay. Did you want to say any names of who they were? You had mentioned it before the show.
Well, certainly Senate Minority Leader Brian Lees has been a supporter and on the Republican side, and Assistant Majority Leader Linda Melkonian joined him at our Clean Elections bus tour stop in Springfield on Friday and had a picture taken outside of our bus, and they're looking forward to working with us to implement this law should the voters pass it.
So, if I understand you correctly, it would be only about $10 million extra that would have to come out of the state budget, and you think that that money could be found from areas where special interests are getting tax breaks right now, and you think that
I think it
that's
could come out of savings, savings in the state budget. Right now the state is running a surplus. This is a relatively small amount of money, and I'm not exactly sure how we would quantify opening up our political system in terms of dollars and cents, but if more voter participation, more candidates running for office, an open debate on key issues of the day, and voters feeling like their legislators are accountable to them, if that means is 0.1% of the state budget is allocated towards that, then I think that's a pretty good investment.
Okay. There was an article in the Globe by Jeff Jacoby that came out against this. Maybe we should just touch on that briefly. I mean, I think in a nutshell, he was kind of equating that a yes on question 2 would limit individuals' political choices. That seems a bit of a stretch to me, but would you like to quickly respond?
Well, I think it's false. I think that 2/3 of races in this state are completely uncontested at the state legislative level. In 2/3 of the districts around the state, when voters go to cast a ballot, there's only one name in front of them. Democracy is supposed to be about choices, not about endorsing whoever appears, in front of you on the ballot.
Well, he was saying that it would limit the amount of money that people could give to the candidate of their choice, and that everybody would be giving to a pool that would enable anybody, who's eligible to take that money. Though that seems actually sort of fair to me, but.
Well, in reality, when you look at who's giving money to political campaigns, his point may have some validity, but only in a world where a lot of us make political contributions. 0.5% of the people of the state, 0.5% of all the voters give a contribution of $100 or more. They give 80% of the money. And when you combine that fact with the fact that 90% of the races are won by the candidate who spends the most, that 0.5% of us has a whole lot more power than the 99.5% of the rest of us who.
Well, I think I would have to agree with you there that it's always frustrating when you see so many flashy commercials by one candidate and you don't hear much from the others. And I think that we did a show here a month ago about all the candidates running in District 8, and there were some really great candidates who didn't get very much recognition simply because of the money that they had to spend. So.
Well, certainly are underfunded challengers out there at every level of government. And while the 8th Congressional District here was really an incredible example of a lot of grassroots politics among that first tier of candidates. Several of those candidates who didn't make it into the first 5 or 6 candidates in the first tier certainly did not make it because they didn't have the money. Money is a very key ingredient, but not the only ingredient in winning these days. The downside is that you have to have a certain amount of money to even get noticed. It's years out from Election Day, or a year out, the press generally focuses on 2 issues: horse racing in the polls, and how is a candidate doing in fundraising. It's not, are their opinions matching up with those of the people they're going to serve. It's not what their public service has been in the past, but it's how much money they have in their campaign account and what do the polls look like. Those aren't always the best indicators of where the public is a year out from Election Day. But it certainly keeps other candidates from running because it seems like it's too hard to overtake those candidates who are already out there.
We only have a little bit of time left, a minute or so, but I just was curious. Is Massachusetts, how many other states are doing this, and would this be sort of,
There,
you know,
there are two other states that have passed similar reforms. Massachusetts and Arizona might join them this year, should voters enact Question 2 here and a proposition on the ballot in Arizona. We have a lot of support. AARP, Common Cause, and the Legal Women Voters are all supporting this question, as well as a broad spectrum of voters. And
what are the other two states where it's already,
Maine and Vermont are states where it's been passed.
and how's it doing there?
They seem to be being implemented well, and it'll start impacting races soon.
When was that enacted there?
96 in Maine and 97 in Vermont, so they're just in the first stages.
I see, interesting. Well, thank you very much for coming out
thanks for
tonight.
having me.
And I think I might have said at the beginning of the show, I misspoke the date of the election. It's November 3rd, it's Tuesday, November 3rd, and we've been talking with David Donnelly about Question 2. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with some people to talk about Question 4. Hi, welcome back, and we are going to talk now about question 4 on the ballot questions, which actually is a referendum on an existing law, a law that was passed by the legislature and took effect in March of this year, 1998. It is called the Electric Utility Industry Restructuring Law, and or ballot question. With me in the studio are two guests on either side of this. From the yes on question 4, I have John Hurst.
Good evening, Laurel.
How are you doing?
It's fine. Good to be here.
Good. And from the no on question 4, I have John O'Connor.
Hi, Laurel.
Known to you all from the District 8 candidate race not too long ago. And also your efforts in this are, you called yourself the Campaign for Fair
Electric
Rates. Okay, great. We're going to start off by having you each describe your position for approximately 4 minutes. We'll start with the yes side, John Hurst.
Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Laurel.
great.
It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I appreciate the invitation. I'm proud to be here this evening as the co-chair of the Yes on 4 Coalition, which is a statewide organization of over 60,000 individuals from across the Commonwealth. Residents, we have employers, we have labor leaders, we have environmentalists, consumer advocates, all working for a yes vote on November 3 on question 4. Most of us were involved in this issue 3.5 years ago, Laurel, when we first embarked on this important journey to try to add competition into a monopoly, into the electric utility industry, which for decades upon decades, 70 years, came in for rate increase after rate increase, and were guaranteed 12% rates of return. We knew that adding competition to the generation of electrons would be good for all consumers. I represent retailing. I'm president of the Retailers Association of Massachusetts, a statewide organization of 1,600 retailers, 96% of which you would consider not mom and pop type of retailers. And we know retailing more than any industry understands that competition is good for consumers. It means lower costs, more choices, and better service for all consumers. So we knew that we needed to introduce competition into the electric utility industry, into the generation component. And after 3.5 years of extensive regulatory and legislative hearings, ultimately last November we passed the Massachusetts electricity law. And this is an important law for 3 reasons. It's important for consumers because we are mandating rate cuts for all consumers, 10% this year, which means $4.1 million in savings here in Somerville, 15% next year, which will go to 6.2 million savings. And that's why consumer groups like iRate are supporting a yes vote on question 4. Another reason we're supporting it is for economic benefits. This new law, if we can retain it, will create 65,000 new jobs by the year 2010. It will retain 7,000 manufacturing jobs. And that's why chambers of commerce, dozens of them across the state, are supporting a yes vote on question 4, as is the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. And the third reason we're supporting a yes vote on question 4 is because it's good for our environment. And that's why groups like the Conservation Law Foundation is a member of the Yes on 4 Coalition. It's why the Natural Resources Defense Council supports a yes vote on question 4. Because under this new law, we're going to create competition and bring in clean technologies, new plants, a lot of gas-fired power plants that are much cleaner than all the plants that we have online now. We're going to be able to phase out that old power, those dirty plants, some of the unsafe plants. And that's going to be great for consumers, not only for cost reasons, but also for the environment. We're going to be reducing carbon in our air here in Massachusetts by the same equivalent as 750,000 cars. So for all these reasons, for consumers, for our economy, and for our environment, we're urging a yes vote on question 4 on November 3rd.
Okay, great. Thank you. 30 seconds to spare.
Thank you.
Okay.
Timed that well.
All right. All right, and from the opposition.
Do you remember that novel, 1984, by George Orwell? I'm sure this is a great man here, but I tell you, the yes side is funded almost exclusively by the monopolies, by Boston Edison, by Mass Electric. If you look at their filings as of today, They've gathered over $4.6 million, and 96% of that money is from Boston Edison, Mass Electric, Com Electric, and the monopolies. The yes side is funded almost fully by the electric monopolies because essentially what happened is we got a new law, all right. And I'm for energy deregulation, don't get me wrong. We do need to move towards choice. We do need to move towards much cleaner air. We do need to move towards substantial savings for consumers. But what we got was a law that essentially favors the monopolies. There is no competition this year because even the biggest energy giant in the country, Enron from Texas, will tell you straight up they can't compete in Massachusetts because the law favors Boston Edison. If the great bank robber, Jesse James, and his brother Frank James were alive today, they would marvel at what the utility companies did up on Beacon Hill. They spent close to $3 million essentially buying our state legislative leaders and political leaders and everybody from here to state reps all the way out to Springfield, Massachusetts. They spent $3 million. They bought themselves a sweetheart deal. And for $3 million, what do the utility companies get out of this? Depending on whose studies you believe, $6 to $8 to $10 billion. The big question on energy deregulation is who pays for the bad investments of the past? Will it be the utility companies themselves or will it be the average citizen? The way the utility companies operated is they got a law passed that puts a hidden charge on your electric bill. People are scratching their head, they're pulling out their electric bills, they're wondering, what is this thing called the transition charge? Well, that's the bad investment charge. The big question when you move from a monopoly to a competitive market, which we're not at yet, is who's going to pay for the investments that go belly up? Who's going to pay for the trash to energy plants, the bad contracts that the private utility companies made, the nuclear power plants? These are so-called stranded costs or bad investments. It's interesting how they've invented a language even to hide up a bad investment. They don't call it a bad investment, they call it a stranded cost. Who pays for that? The law says that the average citizen has to pay for the electric light monopolies' bad investments. That's wrong. Why should the average Joe have to pay for a bad investment that Boston Edison made? So we're for lower prices. In fact, the reason we're encouraging a vote no on question 4 is your electric light bill should be coming down closer to 30%. In Massachusetts, we pay some of the highest electric bills in the United States of America. In fact, every year there's a study, we come in anywhere from 2nd to 5th place. The so-called rate reduction, that's not a true rate reduction. The Wall Street Journal actually did a great analysis of it this summer, and they pointed out it's kind of like a loan. They give you the 10% this year, 15% next year, but you have to pay that back, depending on which utility monopoly district you're in. You have to pay that back, and you got to pay it back with interest. Peter Diamond from Com Electric called it a loan system, a deferral. It's like you go to McDonald's, you get that 2 Big Mac special, and you buy 2 Big Macs for $2. Then a couple years down the road, you get a bill in the mail that says those Big Macs actually cost you $4 or $6. So, yes, I think we're all for energy deregulation. Yes, we're for a better deal for consumers. They say 10 or 15%, I say 30%. We got to repeal this law, vote no on question 4 so that we can get to real savings, so we can get to real competition. You know, how many people in Somerville have gotten a phone call from anybody who's willing to compete with Boston Edison? Nobody, because this law is so rigged in favor of the electric light monopolies. I'll also say on the environmental side, I wrote a book on alternative energy. I know this issue better than anybody. If you look at the fine print of this law, it phases out energy conservation within 5 years. We have mandatory programs now. They'll be phased out to $0 for energy conservation.
Okay.
Bad for the environment, bad for jobs, bad for business, and bad for the consumers. Why should everyday citizens pay for rich people's mistakes?
Well, there are a lot of questions that have been raised. I mean, I have a lot of questions, so I would imagine that other people do too. Now, to address, to just get the one thing, I was sent some stuff in the mail from the Yes on 4 Coalition, and I have to say one thing about the money. I mean, we were just talking about campaign finance reform on question 2. So I know that the Yes campaign has spent a lot of money, and they sent me this whole big list. I mean, like 20 plus pages of people, groups, and who were supporting them, and I'm just, you know, wondering. They did a lot of work to get all these people. I mean, you know, here's a guy, a dentist, who's supporting it. I mean, everybody down to like Joe's Variety Show on up to, you know, Data General and all these people. So my question to start with in rebuttal is, here are all these big companies, and they're saying that the primary reason is we're going to lower rates. But we all know that business people are looking to make a profit, to make money. I mean, companies don't just pass a law so that somebody else makes money. And so what is, I mean, what is the savings down the road, say, 10 years from now?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Laurel, because recently Standard & Poor's DRI put out a study just to that effect. And Standard & Poor's, you know, millions and millions of people around the world look to Standard & Poor's for economic sense and economic recommendations. And Standard & Poor's is showing that this is going to, the Massachusetts electricity law, if we get a yes vote on November 3, will save number 4, November 3, actually.
Oh, November 3rd.
Yeah,
I thought you said
yeah.
number 3. Okay.
But if we can hold on to this law with a yes vote, it's going to mean $10 billion in savings for all consumers across the Commonwealth by 2010. $10 billion. You add to that the multiplier effect, all the additional money staying in our economy instead of going into the pockets of a monopoly under the old system. Staying in your pocket and my pocket and multiplying throughout the economy. It's $19.6 billion in increased consumer disposable income. That's an important investment into our economy. That could all go down the drain if we lose this election. You know, there is a reason why 60,000 people throughout the Commonwealth are supporting a yes vote and a member of our coalition. It's because they're seeing real mandated savings. Now, 15% savings means a lot to me and my family. I think it means a lot to the hardworking families in Somerville. It may not mean a lot to Mr. O'Connor and his wife, but I think it means a lot to hardworking people
Listen,
across the
you
Commonwealth.
should keep my wife out of this. This has nothing to do with my wife, and so I would appreciate you not personally attacking my wife. I'll tell you, this is the most sophisticated robbery ever designed by the minds of men and women. It's going to cost the consumers about $6 to $8 billion, depending on whose studies you believe. It's going to cost us about $2,600 per family. Look at that. Look at your electric light bill. Look at the transition charge on your electric light bill. That's to pay for these guys' bad mistakes. We talk about this is 60,000 people. Why if this is actually going to hurt the utility companies, why are the utility companies supporting the yes on question 4? Why is 96% of that budget coming from Boston Edison, from Western Mass Electric, from Mass Electric? Because the monopolies got themselves a sweetheart deal up in Beacon Hill. And this is not helpful to the average citizen. You talk about $10 billion worth of savings. My plan, if that's about $10 billion in savings, we're talking about doubling that. We're talking about $20 billion
So you
in
have
savings.
an alternative plan.
Right, which would cut electric rates by 30% by eliminating the bad investment charge on people's electric bill. And we're going to release that
Now,
publicly next week so people can take a very strong look at it. But I would argue to you that this is a bill. He and I agree on one thing. We should move towards competition. We should move towards, we probably agree on a couple things. We should move towards cleaner energy systems. Where we disagree is who should pay for the bad investments. He's saying everybody should pay for it. I'm saying the utility companies should pay for their own bad investments. When anybody makes an investment in this society and it goes belly up, that person who takes the risk pays for that bad investment. That's what we're saying here. This is
Okay,
like lemon capitalism. You're rewarding people for making mistakes,
All
and
right,
that's
it
wrong.
says it right here. I just want to get the, are we talking about where it says the law lets a utility recover from customers previously incurred costs related to generating plants and contracts that have become uneconomical under competition? That's kind of
That's
what we're
right.
talking about.
That's
But
right.
how do they recover that?
Well, it's important to note,
By
Laura,
charge
that,
on your
that
electric bill.
over that over the decades we have paid all these costs, these so-called stranded costs that John talks about. What this law does, this law cuts it. We're already cutting stranded costs over half under this law. This law breaks up the monopolies. It's making them divest of their generation assets. It's working. You know, Electric received 6 times book value for their generation assets. All that money, that net money, is going right to the ratepayers. It's not going to the stockholders. It's going to the ratepayers on lower rates.
But where does the utility recover the costs?
By a hidden tax on your
the
electric bill.
transition
It's
charge,
called
which
the
is
transition charge.
not hidden, and it was hidden under the old law that John would have us go back to with a no vote. It's right there on your bill with a yes vote.
Because from competition, in other words, being able to...
You have these costs were came about under, many of them under government mandates, purchase power contracts.
like nuclear plants?
Federal law required these utilities
No,
to
no, no.
buy these contracts.
That's
John
wrong.
understands
That's
that
wrong. That's wrong.
under law.
That's wrong. The majority of
And-
these, the majority of these expenses, so-called uneconomical investments, were decisions made by privately owned utility companies that, for instance, the nukes up in Seabrook and down in Pilgrim. Those things were jammed down the throats of consumers against the will of the people. It was never mandated by government. You recall the thing up in Seabrook where the town voted against the thing twice. They were overruled. The utility company pushed that on the neighbors. Now, all of us are being asked to pay for those investments that are going to go belly up. Why should we keep alive the nuclear power plants here in Massachusetts or in New England? You know, simply because people made bad investments 20 years ago. The point John makes is that, well, you know, we've paid for this stuff all along. That's correct. We've been getting ripped off and robbed by Electric and Boston Edison and Mass Electric all throughout this campaign. In fact, the executives of Boston Edison and Mass Electric and Electric, they won't even come to these debates. And what
that
of
clearly,
our money.
if you read a real independent study, not studies that are voodoo economics that
How much is
only
it? How much
look
is
at
it?
certain numbers.
How much is it?
This
How much are the bad investments?
It's in the neighborhood of about $4 billion.
$4 billion.
Which were government mandated numbers.
That's false.
And we
That
brought them
is
down
false.
over 50%, and we were paying 100% before. If we had not required the utilities to divest of these generation assets and had done something along the lines that John talks about, we would have been seen utilities in bankruptcy court. We would have had reduced reliability. We would not have had the lights on. We need to keep the lights on. We need to make sure that these plants can continue to operate.
Well, I mean, $4 billion is, I mean, some.
$4 billion.
But I know, but so they have, who's going to pay for that? I mean, the company, I mean, if the
The
company.
shareholders. The shareholders.
No, I know that you're
Look,
saying
when
that that's who's going to.
when we broke up
But I mean,
AT&T.
if the shareholders don't,
Right.
oh, the shareholders of the companies, I see what you're
Right.
saying.
When we broke up AT&T, which was a monopoly, when we broke up, you know, the trucking industry and the airlines, when we went to deregulation, the consumers didn't have to pay for AT&T's bad investments. This is a new approach. This is a perfect example of big money stealing our democracy. They spent millions of dollars to get a law that favors the utility company shareholders, not the ratepayers. I'm simply saying, he says it's $4 billion. I think it's closer to 8. You know, Ralph Nader has said this is the worst consumer ripoff in the history of Massachusetts. But let's just say he's right. Let's split those costs. Let's say, hey, 50-50. Let's have the ratepayers pay for half and the shareholders pay for half.
We've already more than split them by making utilities divest of their generation assets. They didn't want to do that. Utilities were brought to the table kicking and screaming. Do you think they wanted to throw away 70 years of a monopoly,
Then why are they-
guaranteed
why are
rates
they
of
funding
return?
this? Why are they funding this
They want to
campaign?
get it done and over with. They want to move on. They want to become wires companies, distribution companies. They want to get into other lines of business, whether it be competing with cable and telecommunications. Let's move on. John talks about nuclear power plants. He knows that there hasn't been a nuclear power plant cited in this state since 1972. We're
Right,
still
but they're
fighting
still-
the
people
in
issues
Somerville-
from 25
the
years ago. Let's
people
move
of-
into the...
no,
Well,
the
what
people-
are going to happen with the nuclear
people-
power
The
plants?
people of Somerville are going to pay a portion of the Pilgrim plant that's owned by Boston Edison. I think they got about $900 million last time I looked in so-called bad investment that Boston Edison is trying to get the ratepayers to pay. I think that's wrong. Why shouldn't the shareholders? You know who the shareholders of Boston Edison are? They're mostly rich people. At the top 5% of income. 3/4 of the shareholders of Boston Edison don't live in the state of Massachusetts. They live in New York and California and Hollywood and, you know, Brussels. I'm simply saying there's a better way to do this. We agree. We should break up the monopolies. It's interesting that the so-called side that is for this thing is actually paid for by the monopolies, and it's interesting that they say it's against their self-interest, which I question, but they have come up with 96% of the money to date for the vote yes, and I'm saying vote no. But yeah, let's you know, at the end of the day, at the end of deregulation, we're still paying some of the highest electric rates in the country. We're still, even though we have a deregulated environment right now, our electric rates are 50% above the national average. Real competition and real deregulation should mean that the rates come down 25, 30, 35%. That's what I'm pushing for. That's what I'm saying. Vote no on question 4. Let's send the legislature back to work to get a deal that's better for consumers, that allows greater competition, that shares the pain between the big privately owned utility companies and the average citizen. The average citizen is being asked to pay for the bad debt of the utility companies. I think that's wrong. I also think it's criminal that in liberal Massachusetts, we're phasing out conservation programs. Within 5 years, these conservation programs will be ended, closed. 20,000 people are going to be out of work because of it. I think that's wrong. We should restore the conservation programs. One small thing that is important is we do need to move towards solar energy, and I will say there is at least one good sliver of this 155-page law, and that's for the first time we have a commitment to solar energy. I've written a book if people want to learn about that. It's called Who Owns the Sun by Daniel Berman and John O'Connor. So I am for moving away from fossil fuels. I'm for moving towards solar and wind and natural gas. But there's no guarantees under this law that we're going to make that just transition.
Well, now, it does say that there's an establishment of a fund, an equity fund, to provide capital for renewable energy enterprises, and they go into great detail about what they are going to be: solar photovoltaics, solar thermal electric energy, wind energy.
That was the part I was just saying I'm in favor of.
Okay, so, I mean, and we are
Unfortunately-
big environmentalists,
Yeah.
and we all know that we have to, so if the law gets revoked, and then
It's
we're
all
left
gone.
with, so then
We're
where
left
would
with
we be?
we're
We
left
have to-
with the old monopolies, we're left with nothing, and we lose the mandated consumer savings for all of our customers. We lose the economic benefits. Under this study, 28% rate cuts is what we're to look for under real competition, not what John's still talking about is old style regulation. We're talking about really putting
No, that's not
competition
true.
into
I
the
am
marketplace.
for competition. In fact, the reason I'm against this law is that there is no competition. You talk to anybody in Somerville, has any company called them to say they want to compete with Boston Edison? No, because this law preempts competition. I'm for a stronger
Well, I
law.
got this in the mail.
And the answer is,
Right
yeah,
there.
who is it?
All energy.
Yeah, All Energy. Who owns that?
Well, now, I did call them and talk to some people about this, and it seems, and
Boston Edison owns All Energy.
well,
true.
but they
Well,
are,
that goes along with a lot
but
of
they
things
are
you've said.
supposedly a clean energy
Either Mass
facility,
Electric or
and they are supported
Boston
by
Edison. One
the
of them.
Union of Concerned
Right.
Scientists.
One of the.
But I don't know that the Union of
I
Concerned
believe All
Scientists are
Energy,
for yes.
All
or-
Energy is either owned a majority by Boston Edison or Mass Electric. They have set up these phony companies that give the appearance of competition.
I see.
And
But-
you're not going to get it
You know,
under this particular law. And
I find
I'm simply saying that, look, we agree, we're all for breaking up the monopolies. We agree we're for clean energy. We agree that we're for lower energy rates. I'm simply saying, vote no on question 4 so we can send the legislature back so that they can give us a deal that's much fairer for consumers and small businesses and much cleaner for the environment.
Some of us have been at the table for 3.5 years now.
I've been working on this
and-
for 20 years.
Well, you were
Long
never at
before
the
you ever
State
came
House.
on the
I can
scene.
trust me on
I was
that,
on the
so-
State House day in and day out. So
I never
don't
saw
tell-
you once.
Don't
And
tell
it's
me.
interesting
Don't
to
tell
note
me.
that during the congressional campaign, during a debate with Margie Reedy, Mr. O'Connor did say that took credit for the 10% rate cut and said he was proud of what he has done. Well, now that the congressional campaign is over.
No, I think you're misinterpreting.
Oh, I got
I'm
the
very-
transcript right here,
I'm very
so-
proud of getting 10%. What I'm not proud of, and the reason I want you to vote no on question 4 is we got to pay that back. It's great we got 10% this year, but you know, and I know, that the utility companies can get that money back with interest.
They don't because
And it's in the
they
law.
have sold.
Read
they
the
are
law. If you're
selling
up at the State House, you'll
plants.
understand. The
I
utility
understand.
companies can get that money back.
You don't
They're
understand.
And-
selling
and-
the transition, is that what you're saying?
They are selling the generation plants. The
Why
net
are they
proceeds
not
above book are going directly to the ratepayers and mandating those
Why-
That's not
guaranteed
true at all.
savings for
Boston
7
Edison,
years.
Why does that
Boston
not-
Edison sold these power plants right up the street here to Scythe Energy for over
50
$500
to
million.
500
121
Premium.
121 million of that $600-700 million did not go back to the ratepayers. So don't tell me all that money goes back to the ratepayers. It went right into the
above book
pocket of the
value-
utility
The
company.
Why
above
do
book
those-
market value is going right back to the, under the law,
Why
to
can't
the
they sell
ratepayers.
only non-nuclear? Why can't they
Well,
sell the nuclear?
I think you're going to see Pilgrim sold. I think they can sell nuclear plants, and I think that is, as you know, the only one remaining in Massachusetts. Others throughout New England have been shut down for economic reasons. And the reality is, under this new law, we are going to bring in new, clean, safe energy. That's why the Conservation Law Foundation and the Natural Resources Defense Council support a yes vote on question
But
4.
Massburg doesn't.
Well, you know,
Massburg is the largest consumer group, it's the largest environmental group in the state of Massachusetts. The reason they don't support this law and the reason they want a no vote on question 4 is it's robbery. Simply put, they did with a pen what gangsters used to do with a gun. They went up to Beacon Hill, they spent millions of dollars, including paying this guy's salary, and they got themselves a deal that he admits gives them $4 billion. Massburg says in their most recent study about $8 billion. So, you know, it's either $4 billion or $8 billion. My point is, why should the guy who's living on Somerville Avenue, why should the guy in Union Square or Davis Square have to pay for some investments made by very well-to-do families in New York City? I don't understand that. You know, quite honestly, even sharing the cost I got a problem with, but if it gets us to real competition and real reductions in the air pollution that's coming out of the Mystic River plant. Do you know under this energy law that Mystic River plant can keep burning high sulfur oil? And we have asthma rates in the Boston area that are 5 times over rates all across the state.
Then why does the American Lung Association support a yes vote on question 4?
Part of the reason is that this law gives Boston Edison and their new owner, Scythe, an opportunity to keep burning high sulfur oil. We got 5 of the worst polluting plants in the state that equal about half of our air pollution. The reason Massburg and Ralph Nader and everybody is against this law and they encourage a vote no is that this law extends well into the next century the operation of these 5 worst polluting power plants. I think they got to change. One way to do that is to vote no on question 4.
Now, who would be another company that would come along if this were not their plan, if it were your plan? Another energy-producing company, for example, that would be truly competitive, like you say.
Entrepreneurs who want to invest their own money to build a power plant, no guaranteed rate of
who does
return.
that?
They are out there in the competitive marketplace.
Do people do
No
that?
different it's no different than building
Look,
a
look.
retail store and
Who-
competing with the guy across the street.
Who's competing? What is this competition about? You know who bought the Mass Electric plants? The largest privately owned utility in the world, Pacific Gas and
Well,
Electric.
probably because they're the only ones who can afford
right.
it. I mean,
So
I'm
you got
saying that-
monopolies buying up monopolies.
And
Well,
look what
what-
happened. They
And there
bought the
isn't-
plants, and now instead of a 10 and 15% rate cut in the Mass Electric area, we're looking 18% because of the premium they received for those plants. Competition is working. The divestiture and breaking up the monopolies is working. We're going to be now introducing co-ops. We have a lot of cities and towns getting together to buy cooperative energy for their residents and for their small businesses and large businesses. That's going to mean even greater savings beyond the 10, 15, and 18% savings. The savings are going to keep coming. But under John's proposal, which I have not seen, he didn't have one at the State House and doesn't have one now.
Listen, you're a liar, buddy.
He's
Not only
talking
did I have a
about
proposal at the State House, but I submitted it to everybody up there, and I had a plan that would put 25,000 people to work actually doing the conservation and eliminating the stranded cost issue. So I must tell you that the big issue here is your side is the utility company side. My side is the side of the...
60,000
Oh, that's baloney.
individuals.
Where's the you know, last time you guys did a filing, and I haven't seen this most recent one, it was all Western Mass Electric, it was Mass Electric, it was Boston Edison, it was Commonwealth. You had one human being giving money, and that was Tom Kiley, the lawyer who worked for the utility side.
And you,
so
John,
a yes vote is a yes vote to line the pockets of the utility
and
company.
you, John, paid
a yes
signature
vote is
gathers
to
to get
line
the signatures to put this on the
that's
ballot
not
in the
true
first
at all.
place.
A yes vote, a yes
a matter
vote,
of,
a yes
public
vote,
document.
a yes vote
Public
is
record.
to support the utility industry and to line the pockets of very well-to-do shareholders. A no vote would send the legislature back to get a deal that's fair to consumers, business, and the environment. We obviously have a big difference of opinion. I do think we agree on a couple things. We agree on cleaner energy. We agree on competition. You think this law is the
Both of which
vehicle.
we
You
lose with
think
the no
this
vote.
law
We
is the
keep with the
vehicle.
yes vote.
You think this law is the vehicle to get us there. I think we can do better for the little person in Mass. This
Then
is
why don't you
great.
go back
This
to
is
the
great.
legislature and
This is
try to
great.
change the
This-
law, John? Don't dump it just
Listen.
because you had a congressional
Listen,
campaign.
one of the beauties of Massachusetts democracy, okay, is that if your legislature is bought by special interests, which you got to admit the utility companies spent record
You bought
dollars up there.
signatures to put this on the ballot.
The utility companies spent
tried to buy
record
the
dollars.
congressional
They spent
campaign.
tens of millions of dollars to try to buy themselves a good deal. They bought themselves a good deal. One great thing in Massachusetts, not only do we have the right to ask for a repeal, but we have a right to go back in 2 years to get new legislation on the books that would solve these problems
Well,
once and for
if
all.
the-
It took more than 3 years to get what we have. And we have a very
It's been 20 years.
delicate
20
balance
years.
of,
Well, if it
you weren't at the
passed,
table.
20
of
years.
Environmentalists,
I don't work for the
consumer
utility
groups,
companies. You do.
energy providers, employers, consumers. That is
to
why
get this
we
far.
have
Obviously,
all
it's a
these
lot of
people at
work.
the
I mean, the
table.
thing is like, 20 pages of fine print. But, I mean, if yes goes through and the law remains, would there be a chance to, if it wasn't going well and if people
You
were...
can always go to the legislature
You
and
can always
change the
go
law.
right back to the people
Absolutely.
or the legislature. Those are the two vehicles
All
in
right, I have
Massachusetts
an
that are
important
open.
question at this point
He's
before
right
we
about
get
that.
into the last bit. Is this being done in any other states? I mean, is there a model?
This
Do
is the
you
model.
like somewhere else? Or is
Attorney
this,
General Scott Harshbarger called this the model of the entire country. We have the Attorney General supporting this law. We have Governor Cellucci supporting this law. We have people from all walks of life and all ratepayers supporting this law and asking for a
well,
yes vote.
I'm a
for
big
question
fan of
4.
Ralph Nader, so I'm a little disappointed that
Doesn't
he
even
doesn't
live here.
support it. But no, I know, but I mean, he's...
Neither do most of the shareholders of Boston Edison. They're still involved
But I
in
mean,
this.
we're talking about like as a model that other states would follow. I mean,
Some people have a tunnel vision. They wouldn't have been happy unless certain plants would have been shuttered down immediately. That isn't reality. We have to keep the lights on. We have to keep the energy flowing to our homes and to our businesses and create the incentives to bring in the new clean power, which will allow for the closings of those plants. That's why Conservation Law
I would agree with
Foundation
that statement.
and Natural
I would agree
Resources
with that
Foundation-
statement. I would agree with that statement. That
Well, then why aren't you supporting yes
I
vote,
would
John?
agree with the statement that we got to keep plants open, but we got to also change it from high sulfur oil to cleaner energy
Natural
sources
gas.
like natural gas. And
I-
we know, and we
I
both
agree with
agree
you
on that.
100%.
I'm trying to find a couple
well, at
points
least
that we
that's
agree
a
on
good
here.
thing.
That's
I mean,
a
I
good
think
thing.
that we all want cleaner energy
Sure.
and renewable energy, and we want lower rates. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's not reasonable to have,
Let me
I mean,
tell
maybe
you something
people
about the
are willing
10.
I mean, this place wanted me to donate money for clean energy.
Right.
They weren't even saying I was
That's
going
a
to
nice
get anything
investment.
for it. Yeah, so I mean,
For
people are
renewables.
willing to do that. People pay more money for
Right.
organic produce.
Sure.
Maybe they're willing
Green
to
power.
pay more money for.
But that is owned by the monopolies, just so you know. So when they talk about all energy being competition, that's owned by the electric light companies. That's not
But-
real competition. And look, I'm all for green power, don't
But if
get me
it's-
wrong.
right.
I'm all for green power, don't get me wrong. I think the fundamental issue is still the same. We didn't have a fair policy debate on this. This is a prime example of power politics, big money stealing our legislative process. It's the same reason you got question 2 on the ballot, to keep the big money out of politics like this. I think it's wrong that these guys can spend $8, $9, $10 million. They're on TV all the time. Fine, we're not going to be able to spend that much, but if the truth gets out, people are going to vote no against this thing, because I think they fully understand that, look, we should have had 10 or 15% rate reductions 3 and 4 years ago. The price of oil has come down dramatically in the last bunch of years, and yet we've had the same price of energy. If you talk to the head of the regulatory agency, she will tell you that if they had a rate hearing a couple years ago, the price of electricity would be down 10 or 15% anyhow.
Well,
So
I
we
have to
should be
just-
getting that, and I am proud that we got it for 1 year. What I'm not proud of, and the reason I'm fighting to repeal this law, is you got to pay that back with interest, and that's where it's wrong. It's going
Not
to happen
true.
right here in Somerville.
Not true.
People are gonna-
Not true,
People are going to be
because
paying
they're
that transition charge for 20, 30 years by
Well,
the time this thing is
everybody,
done.
I think
They
that
they
it's
will with a no vote. They will.
obviously
That's
the
wrong.
money is a
That's
big
wrong.
thing, and everybody says, well, we want a rate cut. Consumer, we don't want to spend much. We want our rates to go down. But I have to say that if people were really concerned about lowering their electric bills, they would pay a little more attention to what they could do passively in their homes. I mean, I don't
No
know
question.
how much. I mean,
I know a lot
this is a
about it.
whole other subject.
The utility companies
But you
make
know
it
what
very...
A lot of
It's
money
like
going.
people leave their windows open, but then they complain about their electricity rates. I mean, there's a lot of
The
things.
conservation protections in this law will all be gone. The Conservation Law Foundation and the Northeast Efficiency Council, one of the strong reasons they are for a yes vote on question 4 is because of the conservation measures in this law, which will all be
Conservation is going to be
gone.
eliminated within 5 years. It's been a mandatory program on the books for over 15 years. The conservation money, I'm not talking about the solar fund, the conservation money is going to be ratcheted down to 0 within 5 years. If you know anything about the law, you know that's the case. If you talk to Douglas Foy, the head of the Conservation Law Foundation, he will grumble and he'll say, well, I'm not happy with the fact that they're going to phase out conservation within 5 years. What he's happy about is at
the
the end of
cleaner
5
air.
years, at the
He's
end of
happy
5
about the
years, at the
clean
end of
air,
5
as we
years,
all are.
they will do a little study to determine whether or not to put the conservation programs back. But conservation, which has been our #1 environmental jobs program in the state of Massachusetts, is going to be reduced to 0 within 5 years. That's why I'm
that true?
encouraging a vote no on question 4.
Take a look at DRI, Standard & Poor's DRI, 65,000 new jobs, retaining 7,000 manufacturing jobs. I mean, this is a real bona fide study. It's not voodoo economics. It's not pie in the sky. I mean, let's look at real jobs. You know, we have high electricity rates. high energy rates over the long term. That's why we needed to introduce competition, and we did it in a fair way, we did it in a moderate way, we did it in a delicate way that brought all sorts of people together, and we need to protect that law with a yes vote
Okay.
on November 4th.
Well,
You need to protect your pocketbook by a no vote on question 4.
okay, we've been talking with John Hurst of the Yes on 4 campaign and John O'Connor of the No on 4 campaign. I hope that we've been able to, give you some answers tonight so that you can go to your polls on November 3rd and make an educated decision about this. I think either way, it's important for consumers of electricity to be aware and to educate themselves because there are going to be so many new changes. Whether the law stays the way it is or it gets repealed, it's really important to think about these things and think about where your money's going and to think about what you can do in your own home to reduce your electric rates if that's your primary concern, or to think about advocating for cleaner energy and renewable energy and things like that. We have, how much time do we have left? Like a minute or short? None time, no time, okay.
Goodbye.
All right, thanks for joining us tonight for the Somerville Producers Group. I'm Laurel Greenberg, good night.
Good night.